A single drop of blood shouldn't destroy an empire, but history has a darker truth that most textbooks carefully erase. The royal families we celebrate on tourism brochures, whose faces adorn our coins and castles, hid a biological nightmare that eventually collapsed entire dynasties. You see, for centuries, European nobility believed their blood was fundamentally different, superior to yours and mine. This wasn't just arrogance, it became their biological prison. Because when you believe only other royals are worthy of marriage, your family tree stops branching and begins folding in on itself in disturbing ways. The Habsburg dynasty stands as the most notorious example of this genetic catastrophe. For nearly 500 years, they dominated Europe through a deliberate strategy: keep power within the family. Literally. By the 16th century, Habsburg marriages between uncles and nieces, first cousins, and even closer relatives were standard practice. The family motto might as well have been, "Why find a spouse outside the palace when there's a perfectly good cousin down the hall?" Charles II of Spain represents the culminating horror of this biological experiment. Born in 1661, he was the most inbred monarch in European history. His family tree was so tangled that his coefficient of inbreeding calculated at 0.254, higher than if his parents had been brother and sister. Let that sink in. Through generations of royal incest, Charles's genome had become a biological disaster zone. The physical results were immediate and horrifying. Court physicians documented a jaw so severely deformed that Charles couldn't chew his food. His tongue was so enlarged he could barely speak, drool constantly running down his chin during state functions. His head was disproportionately large compared to his frail body, and he couldn't walk until age 8. Some witnesses described him as short, weak, and rather lame. But the internal issues were even more disturbing. Modern medical analysis suggests Charles suffered from combined pituitary hormone deficiency, distal renal tubular acidosis, and mandibular prognatism conditions directly linked to his family's genetic collapse. His physicians noted his body contained not a single drop of blood during autopsies, his organs putrid, his heart the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines rotten. Despite being married twice, Charles II was completely impotent and sterile. The Habsburg line literally breeding itself into extinction. Imagine the desperation as the king of a global empire couldn't perform his most basic royal duty, producing an heir. Court documents reveal how physicians prescribed horrific treatments, including applications of fried wolf penis, ground bull testicles mixed with wine, and the drinking of chocolate mixed with amber and ground whale penis. Potions of crushed insects were applied directly to his genitals. Nothing worked. What few history books tell you is how Charles's mental capacity deteriorated alongside his physical form. He was described as always on the verge of death, but repeatedly baffling Christendom by continuing to live. By adulthood, he was completely unable to govern, frequently falling into fits of weeping over his condition, suffering seizures that courtiers desperately tried to hide from foreign visitors. In his final years, Charles became convinced he was bewitched, demanding exorcisms and allowing doctors to drill holes in his skull to release evil humors. When Charles II finally died in 1700, just shy of 39, his autopsy revealed horrors that shocked even experienced royal physicians. His body, according to reports, did not contain a single drop of blood. His heart was the size of a peppercorn. His lungs corroded. His intestines rotten and gangrenous. He had a single testicle, black as coal, and his head was full of water. But the Habsburg disaster wasn't isolated. The Egyptian Ptolemies practiced brother-sister marriages for generations. Cleopatra herself was the product of approximately 11 generations of incest. The genetic consequences likely included immunodeficiencies, hormonal issues, and increased vulnerability to disease, possibly explaining why the once mighty Ptolemaic dynasty eventually lost power. And what about Britain's beloved Queen Victoria? She carried a genetic mutation causing hemophilia, the royal disease, that she passed to royal houses across Europe through her children's marriages. Her grandson, Alexei Nikolaevich, heir to the Russian throne, suffered so severely that he could bleed to death from a minor injury. His condition led his desperate mother to seek help from the infamous Rasputin, setting in motion events that would contribute to the Russian Revolution. The genetic fallout extended beyond physical ailments. King Ludwig II of Bavaria, from another highly inbred royal line, displayed increasingly erratic behavior, obsessive building projects, and withdrew from public life entirely. Modern analyses suggest he suffered from schizotypal personality disorder, likely exacerbated by generations of consanguineous marriages. The most disturbing aspect of royal inbreeding was its deliberate nature. These weren't accidents or cultural misunderstandings. Royal houses maintained extensive genealogical records and actively chose genetic isolation. Philip II of Spain, after seeing the consequences in his relatives, still arranged for his niece to marry his nephew, writing in correspondence, "Although marriages between such close relatives should generally be avoided, in royal families they are necessary evils." Court documents from across Europe reveal frantic behind-the-scenes efforts to conceal the worst symptoms of inbreeding from the public. When Spanish Habsburg princes were born with severe deformities, they were hidden away in remote palaces. When British royals developed mental instabilities, they were secretly institutionalized. The Georgian kings of England suffered from porphyria due to consanguineous marriages, causing King George III infamous madness, which wasn't madness at all, but genetic disease manifesting as excruciating physical pain and neurological deterioration. Consider this horrifying possibility. The major decisions affecting millions of lives in these empires were being made by individuals whose cognitive abilities were severely compromised by genetic collapse. Wars declared, treaties signed, and economies directed by monarchs whose brains were as damaged as their bodies. Population-wide suffering stemming directly from biological deterioration carefully hidden from public view. The consequences extended beyond individual monarchs. The Spanish Habsburg dynasty's extinction triggered the War of Spanish Succession, resulting in approximately 400,000 deaths. The Russian Romanov dynasty's genetic vulnerability contributed to their downfall, unleashing the Soviet era. Royal inbreeding didn't just destroy families, it reshaped global history through biological decline. What makes this truly unsettling is how long it continued despite clear evidence of harm. Royal physicians documented the deterioration across generations, yet the practice continued. When Charles II was born deformed and sickly, the product of an uncle-niece marriage in a family already catastrophically inbred, his father, King Philip IV, still arranged cousin marriages for his other children. This wasn't ignorance. It was arrogance, the belief that royal blood operated under different rules than common biology, the hubris of power convincing entire dynasties they could defy nature itself. The consequences of royal inbreeding still echo today. The modern European royal families finally abandoned close consanguineous marriages in the 20th century, but genetic vulnerabilities persist. Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth II were third cousins. King Charles and Prince William carry potential genetic markers from centuries of strategic marriages. Next time you see a royal portrait in a museum, look closely at those faces. Notice the elongated Habsburg jaw in countless paintings. See the disproportionate features carefully softened by flattering court painters. Behind those royal facades lies biology's revenge against centuries of incestuous marriages, a genetic horror story written in royal blood, where power ultimately destroyed itself from within.